In February 2013, the Los Angeles Police Department released a piece of security footage, hoping someone might recognize a missing woman. What happened instead was something they couldn't have predicted. The video spread across the internet within hours, accumulating millions of views in days. People watched it over and over, convinced they were seeing something they couldn't explain. A young woman, alone in a hotel elevator, pressing every button, peering into the hallway, gesturing at something, or someone, that wasn't there. The doors refusing to close. And then, she walked away, and was never seen alive again. This is the story of Elisa Lam, the Cecil Hotel, and a case that still refuses to give clean answers. Hi, I'm Emily, and today we're examining the death of Elisa Lam, a 21-year-old Canadian student whose disappearance in January 2013 and the subsequent discovery of her body made international headlines. This case sits in an unusual place for true crime. There is no confirmed perpetrator, no clear motive, and an official ruling that many people still don't fully accept. What there is a video that millions of people watched and couldn't shake, a hotel with a history that reads like a horror film, and a young woman whose private struggle with mental illness became, posthumously, public knowledge in the worst possible way. We're going to look at all of it carefully and honestly. Elisa Lam was born on April 30th, 1991, in Vancouver, British Columbia. The daughter of immigrants from Hong Kong, she grew up in Burnaby and was, by the accounts of people who knew her, curious, creative, and deeply expressive. She was a student at the University of British Columbia, though she was not enrolled at the start of 2013. She maintained an active online presence, first a blog on Blogspot called Etherfields, and later a Tumblr called Nouvelle Nouveau, where she posted fashion photography, quotes, and candid reflections on her life, including her struggle with mental illness. Elisa had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder and depression. She was open about this on her blog, writing in January 2012 about a relapse that had forced her to drop several classes, describing herself as feeling so utterly directionless and lost. She had been prescribed multiple medications to manage her condition, including bupropion, lamotrigine, quetiapine, dextroamphetamine, and venlafaxine. Her family reportedly kept her diagnosis private, but Elisa herself did not. According to people close to her, she had a history of occasionally stopping her medication, and on at least one prior occasion had experienced hallucinations during such a period, hiding under her bed, believing something was pursuing her. She had been hospitalized at least once as a result. In January 2013, Elisa set out on a solo trip along the west coast of the United States. She traveled by Amtrak and intercity bus, visiting San Diego, where she posted photographs from the zoo on social media, before arriving in Los Angeles on January 26th. She was, by every account from that leg of the trip, doing well. She called her parents in British Columbia every day without fail. She checked into the Cecil Hotel on January 28th. The Cecil, which had rebranded part of its operation under the name Stay on Main to attract younger, budget-conscious travelers, occupies a 14-story building in downtown Los Angeles, a block from Skid Row. It was built in 1927, and its history is long and dark. Over the decades, it hosted serial killer Richard Ramirez, known as the Night Stalker, during his active period in the mid-1980s. Another serial killer, Jack Unterweger, stayed there in 1991 while murdering at least 3 women in the area. Elizabeth Short, the Black Dahlia, was alleged to have stayed there before her murder in 1947, though this has never been confirmed. The building had seen suicides, homicides, and deaths by misadventure, enough to give it a reputation among true crime circles long before Elisa Lam ever walked through its doors. Elisa was initially placed in a shared room on the 5th floor. Within 2 days, her roommates complained to management about her behavior. According to the hotel manager at the time, Elisa had been leaving notes for her roommates saying, "Go home" and "go away," and had been locking the room door and requiring a password for entry. She was moved to a room of her own. A few days before her disappearance, she attended a live taping of a late-night talk show in Burbank and was escorted out by security due to disruptive behavior. On January 31st, the day she was scheduled to check out and travel onward to Santa Cruz, Elisa did not call her parents. She had not missed a single call before that day. Her parents contacted the Los Angeles Police Department immediately. They flew to Los Angeles to assist in the search. Hotel staff who encountered Elisa that day said she appeared to be alone. The last confirmed sighting outside the hotel came from the manager of a nearby bookstore, who described Elisa as cheerful, talkative, and in good spirits, browsing gifts to take back to her family. That was the last time anyone saw her alive outside of camera footage. On February 13, 2013, 2 weeks after Elisa was last seen, the LAPD released a piece of security footage in hopes that someone might recognize her or have information about her whereabouts. The footage was taken in one of the Cecil Hotel's elevators on January 31st, the day she disappeared. It runs approximately 2.5 minutes. What viewers saw stopped them cold. Elisa is alone in the elevator. She presses multiple buttons on the panel, appearing to press every floor. She steps out into the hallway, looks in both directions, then steps back in. The elevator doors, which should have closed, remain open. She steps out again, peering around the corner of the door frame with a careful, deliberate movement, like someone checking whether a hallway is clear. She steps back inside. The doors still don't close. She steps out a second time and appears to gesture with her hands in a flowing, unusual motion, as if she is speaking to someone who isn't visible on camera. Then she walks away down the hallway. Moments later, the elevator doors close on their own and the car begins to move. The video accumulated millions of views within days of its release. On the Chinese video sharing platform Youku alone, it reached 3 million views and 40,000 comments in its first 10 days. Viewers across the world analyzed it frame by frame. The theories that emerged ranged from the plausible to the extraordinary. Was she hiding from someone? Was she under the influence of drugs? Was something supernatural at play? The footage was also noted to have its timestamp obscured, and observers claimed that portions appeared to have been slowed down, and that nearly a minute of footage seemed to be missing. Claims that would fuel speculation about tampering for years. 6 days after the video's release, on February 19th, a maintenance worker at the hotel was sent to the roof to investigate a series of complaints from guests. For days, people had been reporting that the water from their taps was discolored. Some described it as dark, and that the pressure had dropped significantly. The hotel had 4 1,000-gallon water tanks on the roof, supplying water to the guest rooms, the kitchen, and an on-site coffee shop. When the maintenance worker climbed up to inspect them, he found the hatch on one of the tanks open. He looked in. He found Elisa Lam's body, lying face up in the water. The tank had to be drained and physically cut open, because the maintenance hatch was too small to accommodate the equipment needed to remove her. Her clothing, the same outfit visible in the elevator footage, was floating in the water alongside her, coated in what the coroner's report described as a sand-like particulate. Her room key and watch were also in the tank. She was naked. Her body was in a state of moderate decomposition. The autopsy was conducted on February 21st. The coroner found no evidence of physical trauma, no signs of sexual assault, and no evidence of suicide. Toxicology detected traces of her prescription medications, a small amount of over-the-counter cold medication, and a negligible quantity of alcohol, approximately 0.02% blood alcohol, far below any level associated with impairment. No recreational drugs were detected. The official ruling was accidental drowning, with bipolar disorder listed as a significant contributing factor. Investigators noted that the concentration of her prescription medications in her system was considerably lower than expected, strongly suggesting she had stopped taking them or had significantly reduced her dosage in the days before her death. The physical questions that the ruling left open were significant. The rooftop was accessible only via locked stairwell doors requiring a staff passcode, or via the hotel's exterior fire escape. Police dogs had searched the rooftop in the days after Elisa's disappearance and found no trace of her scent, though her scent trail was later said to have gone cold near a window connected to the fire escape. A video posted online after her death showed that the roof was relatively accessible via that fire escape, and that 2 of the 4 water tank lids were open at the time. The tanks themselves were 4 by 8-foot cylinders mounted on concrete blocks, with no fixed ladder or access point. Hotel workers used a portable ladder to inspect them. The lid on the tank where Elisa was found was open when the maintenance worker arrived. How she got onto the roof, how she got into the tank, and how the lid came to be in the position it was, these questions were not definitively answered. The official ruling: accidental drowning, bipolar disorder a contributing factor, was accepted by the coroner and the LAPD, and the case was closed. It has not been accepted universally, and the debate has continued well beyond the initial media coverage. The most widely discussed theory, and the one most consistent with the available evidence, is that Elisa was experiencing a severe psychiatric episode at the time of her death. She had stopped taking her medications, or had significantly reduced them, and had a documented history of hallucinations during such periods. The behavior in the elevator footage is consistent with someone in a state of acute psychosis. In this scenario, in a state of extreme disorientation, she found her way to the rooftop via the fire escape, the route the police dogs missed, climbed into the tank, and drowned. The lid, already open, required no one to close it from the outside. This explanation accounts for the physical evidence. It is also, in its way, one of the most painful explanations available. A young woman alone in a city she didn't know, cut off from her medication, terrified of something that wasn't real, and unable to reach anyone who could help her. The second major theory is that Elisa was killed by someone, likely a hotel employee, and her body was placed in the tank afterward. The points cited in support of this include the missing footage from the elevator video, the fact that only staff had access to the roof via the interior door, and the moment in the elevator footage where Elisa appears to be interacting with someone outside the camera's frame. Proponents of this theory argue that a person familiar with the hotel's security infrastructure would know exactly how far to stay from the elevator camera to avoid being captured on film, and would have the means to access the roof without triggering alarms. The problem with this theory, as the coroner's report made clear, is the absence of any physical evidence supporting it. There was no trauma, no signs of restraint, no evidence of a struggle. If someone carried Elisa Lam's body to the roof and placed her in a tank 4 stories above the ground, they did so without leaving any forensic trace, which is possible, but requires the complete absence of evidence to be treated as evidence of a cover-up. A third thread that circulated widely online involved the 2005 American horror film Dark Water, in which a woman and her daughter move into a rundown building and eventually discover the body of a missing girl in the rooftop water tank. The discolored water, the dysfunctional elevator, the rooftop cistern, the body of a young woman. The similarities are real and genuinely unsettling. One of the characters in the film shares a name with a notorious Los Angeles murder victim who may have stayed at the Cecil. The hotel in the film shares its name with the neighborhood where the Cecil stands. People online spent considerable energy on this parallel. What it amounts to, practically, is a striking coincidence, distressing in the way that coincidences sometimes are, but not, in itself, an explanation. There are details about this case that remain genuinely unresolved. Elisa's phone was never recovered, not with her body, not in her hotel room. After her death, her Tumblr blog continued to update automatically through posts she had scheduled in advance using a queuing feature, something many people interpreted as something more sinister before that explanation became widely known. The coroner's report did not disclose the results of the rape kit. There was an anomalous finding in the autopsy that some observers noted, though pathologists attributed it to decomposition. Elisa Lam's parents filed a wrongful death suit against the hotel in September 2013, arguing the hotel had failed to identify and address hazards that posed an unreasonable risk to guests. The suit was dismissed in 2015. Elisa was 21 years old. She had her whole trip ahead of her. She had been posting joyful updates from San Diego less than 2 weeks before she vanished. The last person outside the hotel to see her described her as warm, friendly, happy, picking out books to bring home to her family. Whatever happened between that moment and the moment she ended up in a water tank on the roof of the Cecil Hotel, it happened quickly and alone. What I keep coming back to with this case is how Elisa Lam's mental illness became a public conversation only after she was dead. She had written about it openly on her blog, honestly and thoughtfully, because she chose to. But after her death, her diagnosis became the explanation offered by authorities to close the case and move on. And maybe it is the explanation. The evidence suggests it probably is. But I find myself uncomfortable with how quickly that answer satisfied the people responsible for looking deeper. She was a young woman, traveling alone, in a hotel with a documented history of violence and neglect, exhibiting signs of a serious psychiatric crisis for days before she disappeared. She had been moved to a solo room. She had been escorted out of a public event for erratic behavior. And yet no one, not hotel staff, not the people around her, connected those dots into a welfare concern until after her parents hadn't heard from her. I don't think anyone necessarily did anything wrong. I think this is what it looks like when someone falls through the cracks, when the people around them don't know what they're looking at or don't know what to do about it. It happens constantly. It happens to people who are visibly struggling, and it happens to people who, from the outside, look perfectly fine. Elisa looked fine in the bookstore. She was happy in buying gifts. A few hours later, she was alone on a rooftop. The internet turned this case into a mystery to be solved, but underneath the theories and the viral footage is a much simpler and sadder story. A young woman who needed help and didn't get it in time. I'm Emily. Thank you for watching. Take care of yourselves.